Welcome to another edition of the Tom Green Podcast, as we are about to pop open another episode of Tom Green's shows. With us today is a co-creator of the Six-Man Rotation podcast and Twitter website. And first of all, before I introduce him, I'd like to thank this account called Connecting Sports Writers and Fans, etc. I retweeted that. And had it not been for this account, I'm not sure if this show would have happened. So thank you to that account. He is not Rhys Hoskins, although I tried to get him on the show. Well, not really, but I tried. He is Rhys White, like I said, the co-creator of the Six-Man Rotation podcast. How's it going, Rhys?
It's going great. I'm really excited to talk about some of the stuff that just recently happened, and I'm really glad I retweeted that because I would not be on the show right now. So I'm very thankful for that Twitter account, and I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Oh, of course. Yeah, when I had seen your stuff about prospects and stuff, I'm like, I should bring this guy on for trade deadline, and lo and behold, here we are. So, real quick before we get started, I have 3 shout-outs to give out. As you've seen on different podcasts, I'll give out shout-outs before we get started. My first one is going to be to John Morosi. Rhys is unaware of this, but I went to the same high school as John Morosi, and him and I have talked baseball for a little bit. In fact, his mom is a regular at where I work, Essexville Kroger. So I've connected with John Morosi a few times, and unfortunately, I haven't gotten him on the show yet, but that would be cool if I got him on the show.
That's awesome. What high school did you go to?
Essexville Garber.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, I actually do the PA announcing for basketball and football.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, my next shout-out will be to Julie Stewart-Binks, as I met her at the Manchester United Liverpool in Ann Arbor. That was cool to see that, her and Neil doing the pregame show for International Champions Cup. And my last shout-out will go to Brooke Fletcher, as I ran into her in passing when I was at the Tigers game yesterday. She does the 313 for Fox Sports Detroit, just recently hired from Fox Sports Detroit. And I was also at training camp yesterday, as you saw. Rhys and I were talking about Lions training camp, too, earlier. Talked to Tori Petrie for a couple seconds as well there, so... Like I said, I run into a lot of people, don't I, Rhys?
Yeah, you run into a lot of people, and that's definitely awesome. Nice thing about being back there and being able to go to all the things. I'm really jealous that you got to go to training camp, and then you got to go to the Tigers game right after.
Yeah, training camp was only 20 minutes away from Comerica Park, so I'm like, I got to hit 2 events in one day here.
Yeah.
So there's your shout-outs. John Morosi, Julie Stewart-Binks, Brooke Fletcher, Tori Petrie. So, with that being said, I'll play a quick little clip describing what time of year this is in the MLB.
I can't believe it. He was so young. How could this have happened?
Well, he'd been logging some pretty heavy hours. First one in the morning, last one to leave at night. That kid was a human dynamo.
Are you sure you're talking about George?
Or Mr. and Mrs. Costanza.
What the hell did you trade Jay Buhner for? He had 30 home runs and over 100 RBIs last year. He's got a rocket for an arm. You don't know what the hell you're doing.
Well, Buhner was a good prospect, no question about it. But my baseball people love Ken Phelps' bat. They kept saying, Ken Phelps, Ken Phelps.
Jerry, it's Frank Costanza. Mr. Steinbrenner is here. George is dead. Call me back.
Oh yes, it is the MLB trade deadline, and you have a lot of people out there that sound like Frank Costanza, don't we?
Yeah.
So with that being said, let's talk trade deadline. I'm talking winners and losers here at the trade deadline. Well, first of all, before we get started with that, what trade surprised you the most this time around?
So both 2 trades really surprised me. I really wasn't expecting Chris Archer to be moved, and I also was expecting Tommy Sam to be moved from St. Louis to Tampa Bay. That one surprised me the most, of the move. Just out of nowhere, Tampa Bay just acquires a guy who was one of the better players in Major League Baseball last year. So I was very surprised by that trade. And then started off crazy trade deadline day.
Yes, definitely. I thought, Pham? Why did Pham get traded? But that really confused me. And I have a friend of mine, Alex DeWitt, who's a St. Louis Cardinals fan, who was also confused by that trade. But yeah, Chris Archer was definitely a surprise too. As Pittsburgh is usually not one of those teams that buys. They usually either sell or stay in pat. Clinton Hurdle has bought into this new wave of baseball, which is rebuilding, buying, selling, etc. So now that Pittsburgh has finally bought, we'll see how they do in the wild card race for the NL.
Yeah, I hope it works out well for them, because I thought that was a good trade for both sides. Both sides got Tampa Bay got a guy who's under control for a little while, and then got a couple guys actually. Austin Meadows, who was a top prospect just as recently, and so was Glasnow. Glasnow recently pitched really well. I think he was like 71% strikes in his less than 50 pitches. He was very good, and then Archer's going to be making starts soon for Pittsburgh. So it looks like it's a trade that's going to work out well for both sides, and hopefully Pittsburgh makes the playoffs, because that'd be fun to see.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. I remember watching the MLB trade deadline show, and Dan Plesac and them were talking about how sometimes you have great pitchers in not so good situations, like Archer was in Tampa. When they get traded, it's like they hit a second wave or a second wind, and it's like they revitalize their career like Verlander did. Verlander the last 2 years in Detroit was okay, pretty good, but nothing headline spectacular. Then he gets traded to Houston in the midnight hour of September 1st actually, and pretty much has a revitalization of his career, helping the Astros win a World Series ring.
Yeah.
So, with Archer going to Pittsburgh, I guess I'll ask also. I wonder if Jung Ho Kang is going to come back now that Austin Meadows has been traded. I know that Jung Ho Kang has had a drinking problem, especially driving problem, but if they are willing to trade Meadows for Chris Archer, I wonder if that means perhaps Jung Ho Kang is coming back.
Yeah, I've been wondering what's been going on with his situation, because when he was fully capable and able to play, he was a very good major league player, so he could become a piece that really helps him down the stretch.
As a partial Tigers and Cubs fan, I worry about Pittsburgh sometimes, especially when Jung Ho Kang was there. But thankfully, Arrieta beat Pittsburgh in 2015 in that wild card game. So
yeah, the wild card game was fun.
Oh, definitely. And that's another topic, is wild card games. 162 games, and yet if you have one bad pitching day, you're done. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I kind of like the wild card thing, because it's all you basically are impressive over one game. But last year, the Yankees and Minnesota wild card game was crazy. I thought Severino was going to at least be able to pitch a couple innings. He wasn't even able to make it out of the first inning, so anything can happen in that wild card game.
That's very true, yeah. Pretty much everybody outside of the state of Minnesota thought the Yankees were going to win that game, and then Minnesota takes a 3-0 lead. Oh my God, we got to get out. We got to get rid of Severino. We got to take him out. And the Yankees come back and win that game. So that's one of the most surprising trades is, of course, Chris Archer and Tommy Pham. I'm going to go in one of the most surprising trades. Happened actually after the 4 o'clock trade deadline, and might have been one of the more confusing ones. Jonathan Scope to the Brewers. I'm like, the Brewers kind of need more pitching, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I'm surprised the Brewers didn't go after like a starting pitcher or whatever, because Jonathan Scope's a very good player when healthy, and it was just a weird move, because they made the Mike Moustakas move, so they said Travis Shaw was moving to second base, and then they just had to pick up a second baseman, so I don't know where they're going to play all these guys. I know Moustakas is probably locked in at third. Scope probably could play shortstop, but I don't think it would be very pretty. They gave up two really interesting prospects in Dean Carmona, who's a low minors guy who has a chance to be a decent hitter and a good fielder at the shortstop position. And then Jonathan VR, as of recently, hasn't been as good, but those season already had 60 steals, so he was a decent player.
Yeah, he was a fast player. I have the I actually have played MLB Tap Sports Baseball 18, and one of my first lineups was with Jonathan VR, and I'd have him steal just about every time. It gave me the option because he's fast.
Yeah, if the guy gets on first, you might as well steal because the guy's got speed and he knows how to make the jumps and stuff. So yeah, I just thought the move was kind of weird. Baltimore got two decent prospects and a guy who's definitely going to play when healthy. He's on a DL right now. Mm-hmm. But the Brewers, the infield's going to be really interesting to see.
And that was another thing I was going to have you talk about here is the Orioles. They got a ton of prospects. Of course, they needed to. Tell me about how all these prospects will help this team 3 years down the road.
So, they really started off by going and getting Yusniel Diaz, a couple other depth prospects in the name Machado trade. And I like Yusniel Diaz. I think he's got a chance to become a guy who hits for a good average, plays a good defensive corner outfield, and I think he'll hit for decent pop, especially in Camden. Camden's done it's give guys a couple more home runs, other ball.
And it seems for
the power.
Yeah, it seems that perhaps 3 years down the road, if the Dodgers can't keep Machado, maybe the Orioles might have won this deal as they got the number 1 prospect from LA, plus the number 27, number 16, and number 23 prospect from LA, all for 3 months of Manny Machado.
Yeah. If two of those pieces become everyday Major League players, I think the Orioles have won, and I think Yusniel Diaz is a pretty safe bet to be a decent everyday guy in the Major League. And then some other guys they got Dylan Tate in the Zach Britton trade. I think Dylan Tate probably becomes a reliever just because the fastball and slider are so good. The changeup kind of lags behind, and the command it comes and goes for him. For someone who is a pretty highly thought of college guy. And then trying to think of some other guys they got. They got Luis Ortiz in the Scope deal. I like him. He's got a really good fastball slider combination. We'll mix in a curveball and a decent changeup. Full is all right. Nothing to be too excited about. He's not going to be a pinpoint command guy. And then some of the guys they got in the Braves trade, Giancarlo Encarnacion, he's a very interesting guy. He's got a chance to become a really, really good third baseman to hit for power. Might not be a great average guy. He strikes out a lot. He's already struck out 100 times this season in 97 games. Which in today's game, strikeouts are becoming more and more. I don't know if the right word's acceptable, but they're not as frowned upon as they used to be. And then let me see. I got Gene Carmona right here. Like I said, he's probably a better defensive prospect than offensive prospect. Switch hitter who probably is going to hit towards the back of a lineup to make major leagues, but I feel it's going to be very similar to what the Tigers currently have in Jose Iglesias, a guy who's really good on the defensive side, and anything we get on the offensive side, you won't poo-poo at. They got a whole bunch of really interesting guys and a rebuilt system that was kind of lacking. They had on them play systems, and now they've got talent at the top, and they've got some depth prospects to where it's going to be a long rebuild. They definitely got the opportunity to get that chance.
Yeah, and the comment I have to add is I feel that Jonathan VR could become a leader on this rebuilding team, even though Adam Jones was not moved. Jonathan VR could end up being the veteran that helps lead this team through the rebuild. So with that being said, let's go to the actual winners and losers. We've talked about some of the trades for a little while. Let's talk about the winners and losers. For my winners and losers, I have a few, of course. My winners are going to be the Yankees, Mariners, Braves, Pirates, and D-backs, and I will explain. The Yankees loaded up on pitching, as they still have a 5.5 game. Let me actually check that real fast. A 5.5 game deficit to Boston, which pretty much Boston and the Yankees, loser faces Paxton. However, Oakland has proved that James Paxton will not be perhaps penciled into that wild card game. So the Yankees loading up on pitching and pretty much selling a lot of the farm out to finally get to where they will challenge the Red Sox for the East. The Mariners, I felt they were winners as well because they solidified the bullpen and got a nice player in Cameron Maben in the left field, even though Robinson Cano is coming back from a suspension, but he won't be eligible for the playoffs, so you'll want to have someone in there that can hit, especially when Cameron Maben was with the Tigers, he could hit. The Braves, once again, going by pitching, Gausman and O'Day, even though O'Day is hurt, will not pitch this year. Also getting Adam Duvall, Brad Brock, and Johnny Venners helps. The Pirates for Chris Archer, because I did not expect them to be buyers, but they did. They're going to buy Archer, and they're going to compete for the wild card. And as well as the Arizona Diamondbacks, because, once again, pitching. Matt Andriese, Jake Diekman, and Brad Ziegler, along with Eduardo Escobar from the Twins, they got. So those are my winners. Rhys, tell me your winners from the trade deadline.
I think the Rays are a winner because they got some really talented guys. I do like what the Braves did. I like that they got some guys that not only help this year, but will help next year years coming up. I like what the Pirates did. The Yankees did well. The Dodgers did well, getting the best guy on the market. I like what Cleveland did as well. I like that they know they have the rotation to win games, and they're going to win the AL Central easily. They're already 10 games up, but it's already, they can start resting guys at this point.
Don't remind me, Rhys. Why are we so far behind? But it's a rebuilding year for Detroit.
The rebuild's going strong in Detroit. I like the prospect. Yeah, Leandis Martinez, that works with Cleveland. Cleveland also got a prospect in Kevin Dowdy in that deal. I like that Cleveland got Brad Hand and Adam Simber, which really solidifies the back end of that bullpen.
And the division's been handed to them pretty much, so they needed a hand to try to help win the World Series.
That was good. Yeah, they definitely had the division handed to them. The White Sox and Royals just basically gave them the division. The Tigers were putting up a decent play for a while. And then, recently it was really the Twins not performing like they did last year has really helped the Indians. And the Martin deal really helps them because their outfield is just so bad that getting a solid guy who can just contribute for them and play really good defense in center field is really going to be important for that team because it really helps the pitchers having a good center fielder. They'll have a guy who probably hit not towards the top of that lineup. So that lineup's really good, but maybe towards the middle and provide some depth and give them 8 or 9 guys in a lineup who are really good at that. So it's going to be. I think Cleveland was a winner. Rays, like I said, got some really talented guys to help them in the future and kind of help them in and out. Not going to compete for the division of the wild card anytime soon, but in the next year or two, the Rays have a lot of prospects coming up, and with Austin Meadows, Glasnow, Sam, they've got a whole bunch of major league pieces that who knows, maybe the Red Sox and Yankees take a step back next year. The Rays are in prime position for a playoff berth.
So yeah, I was more looking at winners from this year, and you're looking more at winners down the road. So there were a lot of winners to this deadline, of course. Now let's, unfortunately, with winners come losers, and I will briefly talk about the losers that I felt from this trade deadline. The Cardinals. Did they really have to get rid of Tommy Pham? They were at one point over 500. Now they got rid of Matheny. The expectations in St. Louis is what's getting to them. The Mets. If you're going to keep DeGrom, if you're going to keep Syndergaard, if you really feel like you're going to contend next season, why did you get rid of Familia? Angels. This is Ohtani's here. What the heck? Royals. Yeah, that's ugh. And Jays. So you get rid. I guess. Well, the Astros not necessarily a loser, but a trade we could definitely talk about. So the Astros get rid of F you, man, for a guy that's serving suspension for domestic violence.
That was one of the more interesting trades. And then Blue Jays got some more pieces back. It's just like they both traded away pieces that had some not off the field for Charles, because Charles just dealt with his manager. He also punched himself early in the season. It was such a weird trade. I wasn't expecting it. And then the Astros coming out getting Osuna, and I think the biggest thing was what the general manager said just made the whole situation really like he basically tried to come out and defend the move. It's just like, well, unfortunately you made the move, but now you have to live with whatever bad PR, bad press you did, because you did go after a guy who's suspended for domestic violence, and it's under investigation, under criminal investigation.
Yeah, and here's the thing to think about. Ever since now now we're in the era of buying and selling, which it's been like that for years, but now it's been more direct. This is the first time I've seen where a manager is going to have to sit down with his players, and this being A.J. Hinch, having to sit down with his players and say, we have to welcome this guy. How does he do that?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, especially with recently a prospect in the Astros system. A video came out of him attacking his girlfriend, and Verlander and McCullers were very adamant about him not deserving to play baseball anymore. And now that the guy's career's over, they made some remarks about him. So this is going to be a really interesting situation to monitor, and how Hinch manages this is going to be really important, whether they can really win a World Series. Not count-wise, it's the best team in Major League Baseball. They have a chance to just steamroll through the American League playoffs, but this whole chemistry situation is going to be a big thing to monitor for the Astros, especially with them coming back soon.
Yeah, and especially now in the days of the Me Too movement and all that. Of course, I'm not going to go political on this show, but when you have domestic violence on your record, that does not speak well to people around Houston that aren't baseball fans and are looking to become fans. Well, let's all briefly mention Ohio State, even though this is a baseball show. Like people who are around Columbus, Ohio, and do not watch football. They're not going to want to watch football now that they have a coach that's being put on paid leave because he apparently knew about a domestic violence situation between one of his coaches, etc. That just doesn't look good. And in this trade, it confuses not only myself, you as well, but it confuses one of the great minds in baseball, Tim Kirkchin, too. I remember listening to his thing about it, and it's like, why? I know you want to improve the bullpen, but he's got a domestic violence account on his record. Why?
Yeah, you basically lost all the grace you got from winning the World Series with your fan base by making this one trade. Now, is Osuna a talented reliever? Of course he is. He's one of the best young relievers in baseball. And I understand that Godwin, because the price was so low, they basically gave up a guy who they weren't going to have on the team because he was going to be a cash free agent. He gave up some prospects that have kind of lost their luster, but it was just a interesting move on the Astros' part. They made the bad dirt naturally sleep in it.
So with that being said, a nice talk about the Ozuna trade. Tell me your losers of the 2018 trade deadline.
So I think the biggest one is the Brewers, because they didn't go out and go get a pitcher, and they needed a pitcher more than they needed scope. Obviously, it helped.
If you put it into the scope perspective.
Yeah. It was a weird move, especially there were some decent pitchers out there. And I'll talk about another team that didn't go get a pitcher, and then they actually just had an injury, so they got to go down with Tommy John in Oakland. But it was just a weird move. They got the bullpen to get it done. Actually, no, they're not. They're 7-2 in the last 10. They're doing really well. They kind of gave the division to the Cubs as of right now, because the Cubs are currently sit at 1, and then the Pirates are red hot right now, so they're not. So it would have been really smart move for us, sure, and just didn't pull that off. The Athletics, not good this starting pitcher. They were supposed to hit Mike Fiers, and then I guess what I saw is that they didn't want to pay for his arbitration next year, so.
Yeah, and my thoughts on Tigers trades is I thought Avila could have done a hell of a lot better with the J.D. Martinez trade. I really did. And because so far we've only had one guy come up into the majors like 2 or 3 games in Alcantara. But it's like 3 prospects that are not in the top 100 for perhaps the best hitter in baseball. Come on, Al Avila. So my thought is that Avila learned his lesson from last year and said, if that's the best we can do, then it might be wise to hold on to him for another year and see if we can get something better. Or maybe with these guys that are coming up, maybe we could perhaps become buyers now that Toledo is one of the better teams in AAA baseball.
Yeah, I didn't really hate the J.D. Martinez trade. I was kind of wowed by how little he got back. But I'm totally happy to watch J.D. Martinez on another team. I wish he'd still be on the Tigers, but it was a weird move. I guess from what I read, only Arizona was really after him, because everyone else had a corner outfielder who was kind of rough defensively. But the Athletics, they needed a pitcher. They needed a guy to solidify the 5th spot in rotation just to make the wild card spot. And Mike Fiers would have done that, but they decided they didn't want to pay whatever his arbitration was, because he's been pitching really well as of recently. He really did a good job against Cleveland, only letting up 3 runs. With Cleveland, a team that as of recently has completely destroyed the Tigers, made waves to them.
Sadly.
And then
shout outs to Aaron Gosser and my drinking buddies.
Yeah, and then Flyers did really well against the Red Sox as of recently, which would have really helped if they ended up matching against the Red Sox in the wild card game. You never know what the Yankees could do, what the Red Sox could do. So they were kind of losers. The Nationals not selling off is kind of a weird move. I understand going for it because they're so close in the division, 5 games back. They only really traded off Andrew Kisner.
They traded Kinsler to the Cubs, which I thought, which was more of a seller's move, really, because you want to add to the bullpen, especially when they did in June by adding Kelvin Herrera. But they sold Kinsler and Goodwin, and it's like, well, if they were of course they were dangling Harper out there to see what they could get, but it's like, buy or sell.
Yeah, they couldn't decide. I feel like, from what I saw, the front office wanted to sell, but ownership didn't want to trade Harper, which is a weird move because they're in 3rd in the division right now, so they're no loss to make a wild card. There's no loss to win the division. So if things don't go well, they're going to just, and they're nearing that luxury tax, so they're going to have to pay a lot of money for a team that didn't make the postseason. So I really hope they do, because Bryce Harper is one of the 5 best players in baseball. Best players in baseball should be in the postseason. Kind of a problem with the way the Angels have done it, because they're wasting away the best player in baseball right now. But the Nationals, it was a weird move, because you think if they were going to sell depth pieces, which Kinsler is not the best. Kinsler is not the best reliever in their bullpen, but he provides them depth in case it happens. The starter gets tanked early. The Goodwin was a decent depth guy. Just in the postseason, you need depth. You need to actually be pinch runners. They've done that for you. So it's just those are my 3 losers, though.
Mm-hmm. And I bet the Nats are really regretting firing Dusty Baker, because Dusty Baker had that clubhouse pretty much in control both seasons he was there. They just came up short in the NLDS, and of course, just like St. Louis, expectations can kill, and that's what happened to Dusty Baker and those Washington Nationals. So we've talked about winners and losers, and so I think we both agree that this time of the year, it seems to be about the 7th inning stretch of the regular season. So of course, as I'm a partial Cubs fan, I'd love to see Bryce Harper come to the Cubs, by the way. I got to play this little clip.
2 left. We go in the bottom of the 7th. Cubs lead 2-1. All right. Let me hear you. Good and loud. On 1. On 2. On 3. Take me out to.
Now, if you're a big baseball fan like myself and Rhys are, it's got to be something on your bucket list. You got to go to Wrigley Field and sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to do. It'd be nice to go see. Go to one of the last remaining historic ballparks and go join that crowd. That'd be so awesome to go to.
And I've been to Wrigley Field a few times, and it. Of course, I should ask: have you ever been to a college football game?
I have not. I would love to. I'm hoping one day when I'm up in Michigan, I get to go to the big house because I'm a big U of M fan.
Those two experiences are very similar, honestly. At Wrigley Field, it really feels like you're at a college football game. And if you're at Michigan, it almost feels like you're at a Cubs game. Because the experience is just bar none. And, of course, I've done the 7th inning stretch a few times there, and that's, amazing. Had an old-style beer, too, while at Wrigley. Something to put on the bucket list. And I'm only 23 years of age, and I've done that stuff. So, with that being said, now that we've hit the 7th inning stretch of the regular season, let's talk division winners. Starting with, of course, AL East. Pretty much a 2-horse race, and unless if Tampa decides they're going to come back, but that's not going to happen. So, Boston or the Yankees, who you got?
I have the Red Sox. I think Boston's going to win it. I like their lineup sitting well. Everyone seems to be healthy. The rotation is nuts. Chris Hill's on the DL, but he said he'll be back. Chris Hill's probably right now on the best stretch of pitching. We'll be seeing it in a little while now. Guys already hit 200 strikeouts. I think that's going to be the Red Sox.
I do have a feeling the Red Sox will hold off the Yankees as well. The Yankees have made a lot of great trades, of course, to help their pitching, but with Boston being 5.5 up and both teams on pace to winning probably over 100 games, maybe even 110, I see Boston winning that division as well. Central, I mean, you can't really debate that, really, even though I'm a Tigers fan. I'd love to see Detroit go on a great run, but we know that's not going to happen. We both think the Tribe have that division wrapped up. We just got to put a bow on it. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think they're at the point where they can start, giving guys some rest and just, cruising to the end of the season and getting ready for the postseason.
And I thought to myself, man, if Detroit would have just gone 6-5 in that 11-game losing streak, we would only be 8 back right now. Of course, Cleveland would still be thinking rest of players, but at least there would be single digits between the two teams. So, Cleveland winning the Central. West, a 3-horse race, actually, even though one of the 3 horses looks to be out in front, that being Houston. So we got Houston, Seattle, or Oakland. Who's winning the West?
I think Houston's going to win. I think they're going to go on a stretch. They've got the rotation, they've got the lineup, and they've solidified their bullpen. They should start running away with the division. They're having like what the Cubs went through last year with a little bit of World Series hangover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if anyone's going to take the division, take over a division, it would be Seattle. but I do see Houston win that division as well. Let's go wild cards in American League. So we pretty much Yankees, Seattle, or Oakland. Pick two.
Okay, so I'm going to go Yankees, and then I'm going to go Oakland. I think Oakland will take over as the second wild card in the American League. I really like the lineup. They've got a really, I like Olsen, I like Chris Davis. Chris Davis is just hitting home runs left and right.
No Baltimore fans, that's Chris with a K, not a C.
Yeah, no, not Chris, not Crush Davis. Crush Davis has been very, very bad this year. He's been like one of the worst players in baseball. Chris Davis, though, is just hitting home runs left and right. Matt Chapman's playing electric defense at third base. They've got a whole bunch of really good guys. Marcus Semien, someone I really like. If he gets seventh in that lineup, the lineup's really, really good. Sean Manaea has been a really good pitcher. Blake Trinan, Darius Familia in the back end of that bullpen. I really like them in a one-game playoff.
Yeah, Oakland has been really the surprise of this year, and one of the things that people are not talking about with Oakland is it's either last year or a couple years ago they hired back Ron Washington to help their defense, especially with Semien creating a lot of errors. That has really helped them as they are now 64-46 versus Seattle's 63-45. I think Seattle will hold them off. However, if Oakland does get to that one-game playoff, I agree with you. Watch out, because they could very well beat. They could beat Luis Severino if it came down to that. So your national.
Severino's not been pitching as well recently.
Right. So your American League, we both have Boston, Cleveland, Houston. Your wild cards, I have Yankees, Seattle. Rhys has Yankees and Oakland. So National League, let's go East. Arrieta and the Phillies, Newcomb and the Braves, or the experienced Washington Nationals. Who's going to win that East?
Well, I didn't like what they did at the trade deadline. I'm going to go with the Nationals. They're just the best team. They'll figure it out. They got Max Scherzer pitching really well. I think Strasburg should be able to pitch towards the end of the season. Bryce Harper, despite not hitting for a high average, is really hitting for power. That lineup's really, really good. I feel like, and the Braves and Phillies are still so young that I don't know how they'll handle this last stretch. Especially, I saw the Braves in their last 60 days have 58 games. So there's only 2 days of rest in between 2-month stretch. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they handle the final stretch of the season. So I'm going to go Nationals.
You're going to go Nationals? This might surprise you with this pick, but I think, and of course things could change now, I think the Nats are in too much disarray to where they might evaporate over the last month. I think Philly might hold on. Like you said, Atlanta has a lot of games, only 2 off days in between the next 2 months. I think Philly might hold on, actually, with Arrieta, who has been to the World Series and won a World Series before. Arrieta and Gabe Kapler know these situations. And so I think Philly will hold off Washington. However, Washington's had the experience the past couple of seasons. As you said, Philly and Atlanta are still very young. So I got Philly, you got Washington. Now for the Central, and if you listen to my podcast I do with Aaron, pick carefully in the Central. Cubs, Milwaukee, or Pittsburgh?
Oh, this is probably the hardest one I've had to pick. I'm going to go with the Cubs just because they've got the
good pick. You learned from the podcast last time. Yay!
They've got everyone coming back soon. I think Chris Brown hasn't been himself, but he's one of the best players in baseball. He's good back. The rotation has kind of been shaky, but hopefully Hamels figures some things out, and all once those guys get everything together, I think the Cubs are going to win the division. It might only be by a game though. The Pirates are coming red hot. The Brewers are coming red hot. So it's not going to be like a 3 or 4 game differences. I think it's going to come down to basically the last series of the season for these 3 teams. We're going to have great baseball to watch.
Oh, definitely. Now, people know I hope the Cubs win by 60 games, but obviously that can't happen. I do. I like the Cubs in this division, not because I'm a partial fan, but because with the acquisition of Cole Hamels, the pitching rotation's been fairly good. Chatwood's been kind of that up and down guy, but now that we have that final nail in the coffin, I guess you can say, with Hamels, that solidifies the rotation. Milwaukee, they should have gotten a pitcher, and they're going to regret it. Pittsburgh, with Archer, perhaps they could make a run at the Cubs. And maybe, maybe you could see an NL Central wildcard game like we saw a few years ago if Milwaukee and Pittsburgh can hold up. Or perhaps if one of them takes over, you could see a rematch of 2015, Cubs-Pirates.
Yeah, and the Cardinals aren't far behind either. They're 7.5 games to the Pirates are 7 games, so it's going to be the most interesting division to watch. Actually, them and the NL West are going to be, actually, the entire National League for that is going to be interesting because basically any series against the division opponent is going to be crucial for any of these teams to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Cardinals are still 2 games above 500 as well. So that you have almost a 4-horse race there. So finally, the NL West. We have, seemingly a 4-horse race, but more like 3. We got Arizona, the Dodgers, Colorado, and I'll throw the Giants in there, even though they were the epitome of standing pat. They received nothing, they gave away nothing at the deadline. Who's got this division?
I think the Dodgers have this one. They've made moves. They got Brian Dozier. They got Manny Machado. They've got the really good starting rotation. They've got that lineup. I think they're going to win the division.
I think Arizona is going to give them a challenge, and so will Colorado. However, I do think the Dodgers survive because they got Machado. And, of course, the rotation with Kershaw being as is. So your wild cards. This one is more up in the air than the AL is. We have, let me actually check the standings real fast. You've got perhaps 8 teams that could take 2 spots. Milwaukee, Arizona, theoretically speaking, not mathematically speaking. Milwaukee, Arizona, the Dodgers, Atlanta, Colorado, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Washington, and San Francisco. One of them's going to win a division. 2 of them can be a wild card. Who we got?
Okay, so for my first wild card, I'm going to go with not really the first. The first is going to be the Brewers because they have the best record right now. First team would be in the wild card. And then I'm going to go with, there's really a toss between the Braves and the Diamondbacks. I think the Braves are good. I like the moves they made at the deadline. I really like that lineup. Ozzie Albies is one of the best second basemen in baseball. He is really, really talented. Pretty famous. I think one of the most left-on hitters in baseball. He's one of the best pure hitters. He's up to 300 batting average. And his power as well. I love that lineup. I love the way that rotation's going. They've got a whole bunch of young guys coming up. I think the Braves are the second wild card team.
Okay.
The Braves getting the first.
Yeah, I'm going to say Arizona and the Braves. I think you'll like I said, I had the Dodgers winning the NL West, so take them off the wild card list. I think Milwaukee, like I said, made a mistake by not adding more to their bullpen, and that will haunt them. Even though Atlanta's got a tough schedule, I could perhaps see them taking that wild card. Arizona and Atlanta. Yep, that's what I said. That's who you'll have a battle of A's.
Yeah.
For the wild card in that division. So, with that being said, that is our MLB trade deadline show. Not quite actually. My last question to you will be, do you have anything else to add to this great show that we've got going?
No. I want to ask you,
Sure.
Who do you think is going to win the American National League MVP?
AL MVP and NL MVP. Good question. AL MVP, I gotta go JD Martinez. Jose Ramirez has had a great year, but JD Martinez is having a historic year. And I gotta go, even though without JD Martinez, because I'm one of those old school guys that thinks MVP without him, how would they do? You got to give JD Martinez the MVP in the AL. As far as the NL, that is actually a very good question. I will have to go. Well, even though this will be a very unpopular pick, but I'll actually go Matt Kemp. And my reasoning behind that is, I know people will not actually vote for him, but my thought is, in the offseason, he completely changed his attitude, and he lost a lot of weight, and he's really helping that Dodgers lineup. Even though they had a terrible start, he's really becoming a huge factor in that Dodgers clubhouse. I know, like I said, I know people won't vote for him, but I think people should consider Matt Kemp.
I don't like that, actually. Matt Kemp has been one of the, in a lineup, a lot of guys injured with Yasiel Puig, Cody Bellinger not being as good, Seager going down early. I like that. It's really taken over this lineup, and he really helped the team out. I'm going to go with Murray. I think just because the Braves are going to make the playoffs, I think Rick Love, like, he's a good bet to win the NL MVP. Guys are really, really good. Finally the team's starting to win. He's getting some recognition for how good he's been playing. In America, I mean, Mike Trout, it's hard not to go Mike Trout, and I like the pick of going JD Martinez. But I'd like to see Jose Ramirez win. Jose Ramirez is one of my favorite players in baseball. Good defender. He's been on a team where if Francisco Lindor is your second best hitter, that's really impressive. I'd like Jose Ramirez to win.
Okay.
Even though Mike Trout will probably win.
Yeah, I'm kind of sick of seeing Trout winning it all the time, but I mean, he's a great player. They compare him to Mickey Mantle, and they do that for a reason. So,
yeah. With
that being said, those are our MVP picks as well. And so for future shows, for myself, I'll go. For those who listened to my show with Sweta for Lions training camp preview, be not worried. I did not forget about Lions Raiders. I kind of forgot about it right then, but we will have a Lions Raiders preview as well as Lions Giants as far as those. And as for MLB, I might have an August show, but I'll definitely have a pennant races show coming up, and we might bring Rhys back onto this show. So once again, Rhys, it's been great. This has been quite a show, and thanks again to the connecting sports writers and reporters with other fans, because this has been a great show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that Twitter account. I'm really glad I liked and retweeted. Usually I don't like to retweet things, so that one turned out to well. Everything happens for a reason. So, yeah, and thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed talking the deadline, talking about how the playoffs shake out, and then with a little impromptu MVP talk.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that was Rhys White. This is the Tom Green podcast. Be sure to tune in to future podcasts soon.